Were you always completely faithful to Larry?
Yes.
There was a suggestion
Yes.
that you're aware of that there was a man at AA called David. You made 160 phone calls between each other over
After Larry's death, right after Larry's death.
a few
yes.
weeks. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of phone calls with another man. Was he somebody you had seen prior to Larry's death?
He was somebody that I met in AA. He was a very nice man. There was never anything romantic or sexual between us. And right after Larry was killed, he really stepped up and held me up. I called him so much that it actually drove him crazy, and he had to pull away from me as a friend and not be able to really help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, notice there are two very different yeses happening there. There's a yes that starts very soft at the start and has kind of three tonal movements in it. It kind of goes, yeah. And then there's another yes afterwards that goes, yes, which just has one up and down tonal movement to it. So they're just one word, yes, but I would like you to go back and think, is one of those yeses true and one of those yeses false? I would suggest the yes that just goes, yes, that is a true answer. Okay. I would suggest the yes that goes, yeah, like that, not telling the truth there. So we can look out for this along our journey through this. Romantic, sexual, when that's talked about, you see her eyes narrow, and I would say you start to see anger on the face, and Piers becomes the target of anger around the idea of romantic and sexual. I think that's why, as we were all noting before we came back, you start to see the blink rate of Piers go up quite significantly. And I would suggest we start to see him get a little bit worried. His instinct knows he's just got targeted by her. He has said something which is triggering her. And I would reckon he's starting to feel it at an unconscious, maybe even conscious level. I called him so much, it drove him crazy. He had to pull away from me as a friend. So that's kind of interesting, because what she's basically saying is somebody broke up a relationship with me because I called them so much. Think about in your life, you know, what would, if somebody called you so much that you had to break off your friendship with them, what might it say to you about the personality of that person, the kind of calls that you were getting? Like, what would have to happen for you in a myriad of calls for you to go, this is it, I can't do this anymore, I can't be a friend anymore? Because again, this is starting to give us an idea of the character, the personality that we have here. She says he was not able to help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning. So what she's saying is she's saying he didn't come up to his own muster, and by that she's gaining superiority over him. Throughout this whole piece, what she manages to do is say that this person was less than they should be. And so in my view, I would start to suggest, you know, with all the evidence that we've had so far, that we're seeing the personality of a malignant narcissist at this point, which is usually pretty dangerous. So again, go through all that we've said before, start to look at those things where instead of thinking about a victim, they're talking about themselves, they're talking about the amount that they've suffered. They'll usually be going up against authority. Nothing of authority counts anymore. It doesn't have any validity, easily angered. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Scott, what have you got?
All right. When she first starts talking, when he asks her if she's seen anybody else, when she says yes, everything she talks about from that point starts getting quieter. She doesn't say, were you always faithful to Larry? She doesn't say, yes. Oh, she says, yes. It's very quiet. There's no affirmative in there. I mean, other than the word yes. And then she's head nodding. She says, yes, I never did anything like that, blah, blah, blah. It still keeps getting quieter as she goes along. She never says this guy's name. I know his last name's Nolan. I can't remember what his first name is. And she says he was a very nice man. She always refers to him as he or him. She never says his name. She just talks about how wonderful this guy was, right? And then she's got too many of those affirmative head nods after she answers. She's again, like, goes back to what Chase was saying. Eyebrows are up, and she's like, you know, you get it, you know, or you agree with me. And when he says, was there anything romantic or sexual between, or when she says there was nothing, or there wasn't anything romantic or sexual between us, some people are going to think that head nod, again, leading back to that, means she's saying yes as she's saying no. While she's saying no, that's not what it is. Again, it's that affirmative connection where she's making that hard eye contact. Those eyebrows are up, and she's going, there was nothing. You understand what I'm saying? You agree with me? And again, he's not agreeing with her. So that's why she's coming on so hard with that, I believe. All right. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll make this short, you guys are talking about here is called psychological distancing. So we're distancing from the person, and typically suspects in a crime who've committed a crime or are being deceptive are far less likely to use the name of the person. And they're also less likely to say what the crime is. Instead of murder, they might say hurt. Instead of steal, they might say take. Instead of stab, they might say hurt. So we soften the severity of things. And in some cases, which you might be familiar with, instead of Monica Lewinsky, you might hear that woman. Instead of sex, you might hear sexual relations. So we tend to do this when the statement is deceptive. And that's something that we just need to keep an eye out for. And like Greg said at the beginning, we're looking for clusters of these. And we're looking for changes from normal behavior. And while there's no behavior for deception, change can very much show us deception. And clusters of these things can show us deception. And I think that we're starting to see that a misunderstanding of social behavior is par for the course for this person to begin with. It's a misunderstood or a failure to understand normal social behavior. It's just a little bit dialed in the wrong direction with a lot of this stuff, just in how she responds, how she speaks, how she does fake confusion in a couple of these later videos. That's all I got.
Yeah, so what I've got is, if you go watch her, I think you're dead on, Mark. She's got narcissism traits here. You can't miss it. She aggrandizes. Everything's larger than life. Go listen to how she describes her house and everything else. It was the Taj Mahal. Anything she says is over the top. All narcissists, because they're trying to fill in for that insecurity, are going to overdo everything. Interesting for her here. I had the same yeses. Great. She gave us a baseline and then failed it right afterward. And Chase, you're hitting on the baseline. Nothing we do is magical. What we're doing is looking and saying, if you always scratch your nose on the right and you scratch your nose on the left, why? That's what we do, is why. We're in the why business. She does something very interesting. In this place, she always pays attention, but the minute Pierce says 160, he's using a great interrogator trick. He's slowly releasing information to see her response. And what does she do? She changes her body language. She tilts in. She has that fake concern, and she's trying to fish out, is the 160 calls something new they've found, or is this the old stuff? And the minute he says, oh, after his death, she's like, yeah, and her face lights up and her brow rises, and she goes, yeah. The other interesting piece she does here for me is she doesn't do this anywhere else in the video. There are 2 or 3 places. She doesn't illustrate at all. Watch her hands are down. Mark, I was thinking either she's in the grotesque plane, to use your methodology, or she's handcuffed. She's not handcuffed. So her hands are here. Women typically don't use their hands down here around their waist when they're talking to you. They typically are moving their hands more. Now, remember, it's a bell curve. But she, as a person, anytime she's told us a story, has not used her hands. And then suddenly he pulled away from me. that means something in this story, and we probably want to poke and find out what. I think if we were to dig in, if I were interrogating her, I'd say what happened. And the last one I'll give you, and this is a piece of that, just body language, it may or may not mean anything, but the minute she realizes that it's 160, her lip sinks back in. That we all know means she needs reassurance. And so that's a great indicator. She's like, oh, I think I'm in dangerous ground here. This is a good one. This is probably going to be one of the more telling ones we find, aside from the 911 calls. That's what I got.
Were you always completely faithful to Larry?
Yes.
There was a suggestion
Yes.
that you're aware of that there was a man at AA called David. You made 160 phone calls between each other over
After Larry's death, right after Larry's death.
a few
yes.
weeks. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of phone calls with another man. Was he somebody you had seen prior to Larry's death?
He was somebody that I met in AA. He was a very nice man. There was never anything romantic or sexual between us. And right after Larry was killed, he really stepped up and held me up. I called him so much that it actually drove him crazy, and he had to pull away from me as a friend and not be able to really help me as much as he wanted to in the beginning.
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.